We are in Parashat Miketz this morning. We are in the, of course, third of the Parsha, as we are in each Parsha. And so we are in the part of our story where the brothers have come down to Egypt in order to procure food. The famine is severe in Canaan. And this was actually a very common practice in the ancient world. The northern part of Egypt is not dependent on rain for produce. The northern part of Egypt is dependent on the overflowing of the Nile for irrigating the crops. So often, the Nile has its own, things that contribute to whether or not it is high or low. Some of that is rain, but it can also be rain in other places, right? So that makes the Nile swell. So when there's famine and drought in southern Canaan, if you push down into northern Egypt, there's often food because of the Nile and because of the Nile irrigating those crops. Therefore, it was very common in the ancient world when there was drought and there was therefore famine in the south of Canaan. Lots of people came over the border and hung out in northern Egypt, either trading for food that Egypt had or to become migrant workers, so that they would tend to whatever it was that they could get as day labor jobs in order to get food. In our case, the brothers are coming down with plenty of money. They don't need to work. They just need the goods. It's like people in Russia lining up and there isn't anything. Like even if they have money, there's nothing to buy. So the brothers are coming down with plenty of gold and silver and money to pay for food. They appear at the place where Joseph is in charge, right? He oversees all of it, obviously. And if you'll recall, the first part of our story is he sends them back with the money that they brought. He puts the money back in their packs. So when they get home, they've got the grain, but they've also got their money back, right? So he wants to see, are they going to be honest about saying, wait a minute, you gave us our money back. And they don't bring Benjamin. You'll recall Jacob does not allow them to take Benjamin. Why?
He's the youngest.
He's the youngest and?
The most precious.
The most precious. Because?
He was the son of Rachel.
Son of Rachel, and Yosef is gone. Right? In Yaakov's mind, Benjamin is the only son of Rachel left. Because Yosef is gone. And presumed dead. Although, of course, there's a long midrashic tradition that Yaakov never believed he was dead and held out hope till the end that he would see his son again. So, Yaakov doesn't allow Binyamin to go with them because he's too afraid that something's going to happen to him. But what does Joseph say? What does Yosef say when they appear before Yosef?
Where's Benjamin?
Where... Your spies don't think I don't know. You're here to find the weaknesses of Egypt so you can exploit them and mount an attack. And they deny it. And we are, 11 brothers. And he's like, what do you mean 11? I don't see 11 of you. We were 12. Now we're 11. I don't see 11. Right? Because he knows Benjamin's not there. And he says, don't come back here without Binyamin, or I'm not buying this story of you being brothers. So that's where we're picking up the story, is that they have come back down with Binyamin. Yehuda, the only way Yehuda could get Yaakov to let Binyamin go was to say, I swear to you, he'll be fine. And if my life is surety. If something happens to him, my life is forfeit. So he stands in for Binyamin and assures his safety to his father so that they can go get more food. Remember, they all have families. This is 11 families worth of food, plus Yaakov's people. Yaakov has 3 wives. So it's a huge amount of people that they're trying to feed. Huge amounts of people. So think refugee camps where there's nothing to eat. So they are on the border of starvation, and the brothers have to come back down to get another load of groceries to take back to. I've been watching the Walking Dead, right? So I'm like immersed in this, kind of apocalyptic, kind of situation where it's like just finding a can of something, right, is like so exciting. Dog food, when the kid brought out the dog food, it just is. That's how bad it is. There's nothing to feed the family. So we are going to look at chapter 43, and let's start at verse 15 so we can get a flavor of what's going on.
Page 247 in the green book.
247 in green.
265.
265 in red. Who wants to read?
So the men took that gift, and they took with them double the money, as well as Benjamin. They made their way down to Egypt, where they presented themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his house steward, "Take the men into the house, slaughter and prepare an animal, for the men will dine with me at noon." The man did as Joseph said, and he brought the men into Joseph's house. But the men were frightened at being brought into Joseph's house. It must be, they thought, because of the money replaced in our bags the first time that we have been brought inside, as a pretext to attack us and seize us as slaves with our pack animals. So they went up to Joseph's house steward and spoke to him at the entrance of the house. "If you please, my lord," they said, "we came down once before to procure food. But when we arrived at the night encampment and opened our bags, there was each one's money in the mouth of his bag, our money in full. So we have brought it back with us, and we have brought down with us other money to procure food. We do not know who put the money in our bags." He replied, "All is well with you. Do not be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, must have put treasure in your bags for you. I got your payment." And he brought out Simeon to them.
All right, Simeon had been held until they came back down with Benjamin. So he's been held in Joseph's private dungeon. In wealthy houses in Egypt, there was a private dungeon often where folks were held. Like we saw this with Potiphar. He had, on his property was the Beit HaSohar, the prison where Joseph was held. So the men took the gift, meaning what was in their pack, and then they took other money to buy food. They're going to return the money that they've already should have given to Joseph, that they did give to Joseph, but they came back, and they're going to take the same amount of money to buy more food. So they have double the money and Benjamin. They made their way down to Egypt, where they presented themselves to Yosef. So most likely, this is not that they actually come before Joseph. It's most likely that they come to the trading post over which Joseph has authority. Right? They've been summoned. They've been told to come back down and bring Benjamin. They don't know how to find Joseph. Right? They just come and report to the trading post to say, okay, we did what we were supposed to do. We did what the vizier told us to do. But Joseph sees them. Joseph's watching and waiting for them. And he sees that Benjamin is with them. So imagine this moment for Yosef. The Torah is very terse and just kind of walks through stuff pretty quickly. But Peter Pitzela would have us really inhabit more moments of this story than we get just by reading over it. Imagine this for Yosef. It's been decades since he's been gone, right? And he sees his brothers. That had to be a shock the first time that happened. They are his half-brothers, and his relationship with them was never good.
That's an understatement.
That's an understatement. We can assume he had a slightly different relationship with Benjamin, who was little and probably wasn't in on the, let's throw our brother in a pit or murder him. Benjamin would have been too young, A. B, we can assume Yosef had a special affection for his only full brother, and who was way younger. So he's already dealt with the brothers once, but now here they are and Binyamin is with them. And Yosef knows that Binyamin's in their care. And he doesn't know what that means. All he knows is what it felt like to be in their care, or lack thereof, right? But in their charge, as the son of Rachel, a beloved, favored son of Rachel, a young one, not probably the strongest among them. He's a dreamer, right? A dream interpreter, he's probably a snag, sensitive New Age guy, right? So he's not a man of the field, you know what I mean? And so he remembers how that went for him. So imagine he sees Binyamin, and so this whole mix of emotions. What's it like for Binyamin? Are they torturing him? Do they hate him? Do they threaten him privately? We have no idea, neither does Joseph, what the relationship is between the brothers and Binyamin yet. We don't know yet. We're going to see. But imagine his emotion at seeing his brother. And he can't say anything, or feels he can't say anything yet. So part of what we want to live in is, what is Yosef's motive? Yosef could have just told them right now who he is. He's completely safe. He is the vizier of Egypt. He's second in command of the richest country in the world, because they don't know the rest of the world, right? But the world they know, Egypt is the most powerful empire in the known world. Why not just tell them right now, come here, guys. Benjamin's here. He's released Simeon. Let's come clean. Right? Why not right now?
He's toying with them.
He's toying with them. So what does that imply about his motives?
Well, they really messed with him.
They messed with him, so he's going to mess with them. Okay?
Or he may want to see how they treated Benjamin, or if there's any change in them.
Why?
He wanted the brothers.
Why? Why see if there's a change in them?
Well, the way they treated him, and maybe they changed personally in their lives, or they had compassion for their father.
But why? Why does he set up a test for that? What's his interest in finding that out? Huh?
Well, he likes to see the best in people, and he's hoping that there's something to see in them.
Okay, so he's
Are they
hoping
repentant?
they'll prove him right, that maybe they've changed, because he wants evidence of the good in them. Okay?
Yeah, I was going to essentially echo that. The way that I would put it is, he's willing to reconcile if he sees evidence that they have changed. On the other hand, if he sees evidence that they haven't really changed, then he's willing to let the situation play out.
So that's the why, is that if he sees change, he's clearly willing to risk. He's willing to do something differently than if he doesn't do this test. Right? If they fail the test. Then so it seems that there's something he's wanting. Beyond just okay, if they've changed or not, who cares? Unless that means something to Joseph. If they've changed, then what?
Well, he can reconcile, right. But I have the exact opposite question.
Okay.
He's now in control. They tried to kill him. They sold him into slavery. Why? My question is not why does he want to reconcile, but why doesn't he just go and do something terrible to them? What is it about him
Which
that
is
makes
really
him
the same
not?
question. Why set all this up?
Yeah, because he should have a big grudge against them. He should. He should, but
better than good. It makes him holier, better than. It just elevates him to have that attitude.
So maybe something's changed about Yosef. Maybe he is elevated. Maybe he's matured. Maybe he is holier in that he's got a deeper relationship with a set of values that we would call godly. Maybe he really does want to not go to revenge, and maybe he really does want to go towards reconciliation, but he's going to need evidence that that's Possible, maybe.
Yeah, but I think to answer Bert's question, Bert, right?
Yeah.
I think that perhaps the reason why he doesn't go in the direction of, I'm really going to mess with them now, is that his whole life has been nothing but evidence to him that you can never really predict what's going to happen. In that, even before he got thrown into the pit, he was probably going around moping to himself, saying, my life with these half-brothers is terrible. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. And yet, here through a bunch of circumstances, none of which he could have foreseen, he's number 2 in Egypt. And so he has probably come to some sort of an understanding that sometimes, people can change even if you can't put your finger on what it was that caused them to change.
So this is a very hopeful reading of who Yosef is. In the Midrashic tradition, there is rabbinic argument and debate, amazingly enough. Can you imagine that? About Yosef's motives. And some of them, actually, Bert, some of the commentators see this as cruelty. That he's being intentionally cruel, and he's dangling them, and he might at any moment say, "Off with their heads," right? That he's toying with them like a cat with a mouse, and watching them squirm and suffer, and is getting pleasure from that, and might at any moment say, "Kill them all,"
until he can't take it.
Until he can't take it. So Ramban, I think it's Ramban. One of our most famous commentators doesn't forgive Yosef for this, says that this is disgusting behavior.
Maybe he's perceived in some way that he was favored by his father. And I know that in a way I was the favorite of 2 children. It makes you feel really sorry for the other people.
So either
he have more empathy when they don't treat you very nicely.
Either this is a favorable reading of Yosef, that he gets it, and he's trying to see who they are, and he's opening up possibilities, or this is a horrible thing he's doing, and he's toying with them, and he's having them purposefully suffer, holding out the possibility of killing them whenever he pleases. Mickey and then Laura.
This is decades later, and sometimes the hate diminishes as you get older, and you've gone through all kinds of things in your life, and now you've been elevated, and hatred is less significant at that stage.
So that's a favorable reading of him here, yes? That he's being forgiving, and he's successful enough now that he doesn't need to hold on to old stuff. Well, he's moving on.
He's cautious, but he's, when you all you have is hate in your heart, it diminishes your own life, and who needs it?
So both Mickeys read it as he's moved on. He has some compassion. He's put them empathy. He's put himself in their shoes. He gets it that he was treated differently, and poor brothers, they weren't acknowledged. Possibly he's able to let go of old stuff now that he's successful. Laura?
Well, I see it's also possible that it's a swirl. You can't decide between chocolate and vanilla. He's conflicted. He could be having both of these. I have these siblings. I wish it were different. It's such a modern story too. Couldn't we just be a family? But they were so rotten to me. I just want to make them suffer too. And then I think both can be held at the same time.
So confusion that both of these are going on. That he alternates between wanting to forgive and exploring it, and then
so angry.
It's so hard to let go and get caught up. And
why'd you have to do that to me?
How many of us are completely capable and completely confident and completely present in our lives, and then we go back home and experience a complete erosion of that feeling of confidence and success and independent, right? Often, as soon as we are placed back in that context with those people who knew us then, whose vision of us is still that in some ways, sometimes it's very challenging to stay centered and to stay the vizier of Egypt. Because what you go back to being is the little brother who was picked on as soon as you're back in that context, right? So so many people can't deal with, kids who are like in, 13, 14, 15 because they were so traumatized at that age that immediately walking into a classroom of that age kids, they freak as adults. Like they can't do it. There's things that are so painful for us and so raw still that we don't even know often until we put ourselves in that context. So maybe Joseph was like, he wants to be this, he's become this, and yet the minute he sees them, it triggers all this other stuff, and maybe he's just massively vacillating and confused and
he's clearly a changed. He's clearly a changed man.
He's
clearly a change. I mean, no matter which of these things is true, he's very changed. Because from the old Joseph would have said, "You remember I had that dream a long time ago? Well, here it is. I told you so.
Exactly.
Here I am. I'm in charge. You're there, huh?"
So
he's clearly
in
a different place.
Sophisticated now about what he's doing.
Clearly in a different place.
Either whatever his motives are, he's much more sophisticated. One of our commentators does say he's doing this in order to set it up so that they do in fact bow to him, so he can make the dream a reality. All right, so good. So hold all of that as we go into what happens, like what he does, right? What does he do? So they come back with the food and double the money they're going to return, and the money to buy new stuff, right? He sees them and says to his house steward, he says to the guy who's in charge of his palace, take those guys, into my house. Slaughter and prepare an animal, because they're going to dine with me for the big noon lunch. The big meal was at noon, right? The big meal, like where I come from, right? There's dinner and there's supper. So the big meal happens in the afternoon, right? Then you have a smaller meal later, and in Israel too often. So the big meal, he's gonna serve meat, right? This is a big deal. They're gonna slaughter an animal. It's gonna be a huge banquet, right? What is the brothers' experience of this?
Wow.
They're afraid.
Fearful.
Why?
Because are they being set up?
So all they know is that they've come to
money.
return the money.
Right.
They show up at the marketplace. They report that they're here and that they've brought bench or whatever. And what happens? They're seized and taken to the palace. They don't know why.
They're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
They don't know why they've been taken to the palace. They know there's a dungeon in everybody's palace.
Did they come to return the money?
They came to return the money and buy more food.
Well, did they come to it, or did they kind of decide to return it after they got afraid?
Well, so
it does say that they...
And take with you double the money, carrying back with you the money that was replaced in the mouth of your bags. Perhaps it was a mistake, right? So they've been instructed by Yaakov, take the money back.
They took it back, but maybe they weren't going to give it back.
Yeah,
maybe they weren't going to give it back. Okay,
less pushed.
Okay,
Exactly.
So they are afraid. That's clear, right? Because he brought them to Joseph's house, but the men were frightened at being brought into Joseph's house. So this is how we know that they've not been told, "Oh, you're guests of the vizier. Be welcome here." Right? All we know is that they've been seized and taken to his house. So they say to each other, it must be, they thought, because of the money replaced in our bags the first time, right? And they're bringing us inside as a pretext, basically to kidnap us, to make us slaves. They can't do that outside without explanation. If they bring us in here and no one ever hears from us again, or we just now are kept in here at gunpoint for the rest of our lives, who's going to know? And our pack animals as well, meaning all of our wealth that we brought down with us. Because they're wealthy. They're not coming here, remember, as poor people. So their cars have been seized as well. They drive a nice car.
Not the rolls.
I'm afraid so. The rolls got taken into the garage of the vizier. So they are now thinking, right, they've brought enough pack animals to take all the stuff home. So think about it. They come with, really lovely Hummers that they can load up and take home. The Hummers have been seized. So they went into Joseph, they went to the house steward, and spoke to him at the entrance of the house. Like they're trying to delay going into the house till they can figure out what's going on. If you please, my lord, they said. We came down once before to procure food, but when we arrived, the money was still there. Right? They are coming clean. Whether that was their intention, Bert is a very suspicious man. Whether that was their intention or not, they are coming clean now because they are terrified that that's what this is about. Because they know something was off. Why was their money back in their bags? So they think they're being set up, maybe. But they're going to come clean. So we've brought it with us, and we want to do business with you. We want to buy more. And we don't know how the money got there, and they're freaking out. So the steward replies at verse 23, it's all right. Don't be afraid, right? Your God, the God of your father, must have put the treasure in the bags for you, right? So it's magic. That was a very common thing in Egypt, magic. Right? So maybe one of the gods has favored you and made a magic thing happen, and right? That's how it got in your bags. We don't know. We don't care. It's not about us. We received your payment. The bill was paid in full. What happened to y'all after that we have no idea. Right? Go talk to your diviners. Go talk to your sorcerers. We have no idea. The bill was paid. All right. So 24.
The man then ushered the men into Joseph's house. He supplied water, and they washed their feet, and he gave fodder to their asses. He laid out the offering for the arrival of Joseph at noon, for they had heard that they would eat food there.
Go on.
When Joseph entered the house, they presented to him the offering they had brought into the house, and they bowed down before him to the ground. He asked them how they were, and said, "How is your aged father of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" They said, "Your servant, our father, is well."
Go on.
He is still alive. And they knelt and bowed down. He looked up and saw his full brother, Benjamin, his mother's son, and he said, "Is this your younger brother you told me about?" And he added, "God be gracious to you, my son." Joseph hurried out, for he was so deeply stirred with tender warmth toward his brother that he wanted to weep. And he went into an inner chamber, and there he wept. He washed his face, and when he came out, he held himself in check and said, "Serve food." He served him separately, and them separately. And the Egyptians who usually ate with him separately, for the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, since it was an abomination to the Egyptians. And they were seated before him, the firstborn according to his seniority, and the youngest according to his youth. The men looked at each other in amazement. He presented portions of food to them from what was in front of him. Benjamin's portion exceeded all of them fivefold, and they drank and grew drunk with him. Afterwards, he commanded the one in charge of his household, saying, "Fill the men's bags with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his bag." And they put my goblet in the mouth of the youngest one's bag, along with silver for his grain. He did just as Joseph instructed.
Okay, so they go into the house, and he treats them as guests, right? He bathes their feet. That's a good sign, right? That's what you do to welcome people into your home. And in the ancient Near East, if you welcome people into your home like that, you are now the host. They are the guest. There are strict rules about what you do to a guest and what you don't do to a guest in your home. So he's making it clear to them he's now their host. They're his guest. He puts gas in the Hummers, right? With good indication that they might be going home at some point.
Are there parallels between this and Abraham and the men who came to the tent and Sarah?
Always. Always we are to understand, right, this idea of welcoming guests and all, absolutely. So they laid out their gifts, right? You know, they're going to see the vizier of Egypt. They don't come empty-handed. They're wealthy, right? They come with the appropriate gifts. I've always found that ironic. Like, you know, if you're going to like a really rich person's house, you take gifts to people who don't need it. You go to someone else's house, they invite you over. Sure, I'll come over for spaghetti. You don't bring anything necessarily, right? It's like, and they're the ones who need. Just ironic, but so when Joseph came home, they give him the gifts. He greeted them, and what's the first thing he asks them? Right? How's your father? Right? Is he still well? Is he? He asks after the shalom of their father. Right? This is still in Israel how you ask about someone. Ma shlomcha, ma shlomech. How's your shalom? How whole are you? Right? You don't say how are you? Ma shlomech. How's your shalom? And so they ask after the shalom of their father, and you can imagine how it seems like a casual question or a polite question that you ask after someone's family. That's a nice thing to do. That's considered polite. How's your family? But of course, we know for Yosef, imagine, it's been a while. His father's old. So when he asks, how is he well? Like, he's waiting to hear. Like, is there any hope that he's going to see this man again? And so, right, they answer that, yes, in fact, he is. And they bow down and made obeisance. So it's even more than the usual bowing down that they do here. So then he sees Binyamin, his mother's son, so his full brother, and asks if this is in fact the youngest brother. And they confirm that it is. And he says, so he offers some kind of a blessing, right, to Binyamin.
He knew Benjamin was the youngest.
He knew Benjamin was the youngest. So he says...
He wasn't asking to find out.
Right. He's asking them to confirm that this is Benjamin.
Oh, I thought he recognized. Okay.
So we're presuming he recognizes, but he's, again, putting them in the position of, are they going to come clean and say, yeah, this is the guy that you asked us to bring? And then he must turn to Binyamin to say this, that he says, may God be gracious to you, Bni, my son, my boy. Mm-hmm. And at that point becomes absolutely overwhelmed. And he can't handle it. So he makes an interesting choice, right? He chooses to leave the room. So is he feeling so vulnerable that he can't allow them to see it because it's too much and it's too close and he doesn't know them anymore? Does he leave the room because he's still wanting to be in control and wanting to toy with them, and so he's going to get this under control if it kills him, and he's going to go next door and wash his face and do what he needs to do? They don't have to be necessarily mutually exclusive. Clearly, he's deeply, deeply moved by seeing Binyamin. Possibly Binyamin looks like his mother. Right? So Yosef is seeing an image of his mother.
Well, he's not ready to do what he does later.
Right.
He's not yet ready.
He's not ready to be vulnerable in front of them or to come
reconcile.
out.
Right.
He's not ready to come out. He is still going to keep the costume in place. Remember, Yosef is in full Egyptian garb. He's married to an Egyptian princess. He has Egyptian children. He is speaking Egyptian, most likely. So he's speaking with his steward, he's speaking with other people. He's most likely speaking Egyptian.
We know he's speaking Egyptian because earlier there's something where the brothers didn't realize that he understood what they were saying amongst themselves because the interpreter was in between them.
Right. So we don't know here if he's speaking to them in their own language or if he's speaking through an interpreter. We can assume he's important enough that he is speaking through a he's got a dignitary who's working on his behalf. But they see him as fully and completely Egyptian, and in many respects, this is what a lot of our scholars continue to explore about the relationship of this Parsha to Chanukah. Because we always read this Parsha at Chanukah. What is Chanukah all about? Hanukkah is all about resisting assimilation, right? Resistance to Greek Hellenizing assimilation. Here we have the paradigmatic assimilated Israelite. He's completely Egyptian. He's completely Egyptian. So, is he really? And what does that even mean? Right? So, in other words, our rabbis and teachers and thinkers and philosophers start to explore, why do we have to pick necessarily between being fully American and fully Jewish? Right? That Yosef, his sons become 2 of the 12 tribes. They become part of the founders of our people. And he is completely assimilated.
Well, he probably was circumcised, don't you think?
So many Egyptians were as well.
Oh, so
Yes.
Well, I think when you say he was, you're also leaving out that, of course, he wasn't, because he's both. You know, he's still, if his sons can become that, then there's something about him that even when assimilated, who you are is who you are. And that's not the robe and the language and the job. It's your family, it's your heritage, it's, you know, it's your soul, it's everything.
So if you are fully assimilated as a Jew living in America, and you have a Christmas tree, and you go to midnight mass, and you do, so are you? So you're still are who you are. You're still Jewish. You're still all that stuff. Yeah.
Well,
so it makes no difference if we completely assimilate.
You can change your noses, but you can't change your emotions. And there's always that.
So what does it mean?
So I don't know enough about what else is going on for Joseph that his sons can become those tribes.
Yeah.
There's got to be something else. You know, we don't talk about who his God is. You're talking about what he's wearing. So if I'm not wearing a tallis and a kippah, but I'm not going to mass and praying to Jesus, then is that more like what Joseph's doing?
Right. So
Is there a crucifix on the wall?
These are the questions.
And do we know if he taught his boys?
And what did he teach them
Right.
about who they are?
Right. What did they teach him? And is there one God, or what was in his home? Because when he got there, they all knew he was a Hebrew.
When who got where?
When Joseph
Got to Egypt.
got to Egypt, didn't they?
The people he was among.
The Egyptians, she means.
When he was sold into slavery to
Yes.
Potiphar,
Yes.
they know he was a Hebrew.
Yes.
So one would assume his wife, when they got married, knew of his origins.
But we have no idea what that. So I guess part of my question is, what does that mean that he was
Right.
Hebrew, yet he marries this princess of Egypt. He's completely immersed in Egyptian culture and society and the power structure and the privilege, of being the second to Pharaoh. What does that mean that he's still Hebrew?
Right.
Do we know anything more about that?
We don't.
Like a conversion.
We don't know. Is he hiding it?
Right.
Is it just completely irrelevant to him?
Yeah.
I'm a cultural Jew in some way, or it means nothing to me.
He wants his bagel with his...
And that's all.
Right.
He has some tastes from home
Right.
that he likes, but other than that, no connection at all to being Hebrew.
Then
At all.
How do his children become?
It's not until Grandpa shows up that the children,
Makes everything right.
you recall, because we're not going to get there this week, but Yaakov takes them and blesses them. He takes them as his heirs.
Okay.
He takes them in and says, and we still,
Well, I'm going to take back what I said about Joseph.
so we have no idea if it's, maybe Yosef's already told them that, maybe they know that, but it really is a question for our time, what is it? So we have Hanukkah, which is all about resisting assimilation, right? No, we want to be who we are. We want to be Jewish. We want to be Hebrew. We want to be whatever. We don't want to become Greek. And here's Yosef, the paradigmatic assimilated, Hebrew, who yet has these children who become,
But were it not
definers
for
of what it
Grandpa,
means to be Hebrew.
But then
were
it
it not
says
for Grandpa, they
Egypt-
wouldn't be.
it says
and that's
Really?
sort of. I think of friends I've had whose parents didn't believe in religion, Didn't raise him with any religion, and neither did Grandpa. And so when they say, yeah, I think my grandparents were Jewish, but it's gone. It stopped, and he's not. He doesn't know the camp songs. He doesn't know, there's not an ounce of it. And I think that if that were Joseph and Grandpa didn't come in, then no, it ends. So where's that middle ground?
I want to speak for grandpas.
There's also
We have-
the fact that he felt so betrayed by his family, and then he falls in love, and he now has this wonderful wife, and you kind of start to assimilate and into something else. I mean...
And how many times have we heard that? That being
Right.
Jewish, all that got me, or my family, was
Right.
pain and hatred and, right? And then...
Both ways, and there are people that
Right.
fall in love with
Right.
Jews, and they fall in love with the religion and with the person
And we've got no problem with them losing their whatever they were raised with, and now they're Jewish. Well, that's okay.
So there's a big discussion.
'Cause they
When
found
we
the light.
when we discuss that issue, part of the discussion is because is there a difference for a minority culture, religion, people? Is it different for a minority in terms of what the stakes are in having someone give up what they were raised to become that minority, part of that minority culture? Does that make sense?
Of course.
That the stakes are very different for a culture that's trying to survive.
Of course, but in terms, so you can have the principle that it's okay to convert to us and it's not okay to leave us. That's fine, but at the same time, you can say every individual here in our freedom of choice country can make the choice for themselves, and we can regret it. And we can be happy when we get a new one.
Right? There's a saying that all Jews now in America are Jews by choice. Richard?
In terms of the sort of the rabbinic commentary where they have, the story of the Maccabees on the one hand, and its take on assimilation, and the story of Joseph. I mean, the story of Joseph and Jacob is clearly happening well before Moses. So the sort of what, if anything, do we know about how the Hebrews of the time, Joseph's time, thought about the covenantal relationship, if any? I mean, for the males, all they knew is they got circumcised when they were young, and they honored the God of their father, right? But other than that, I mean, it's all about family.
You're saying that they didn't have much to give up.
To some extent, it's not like he was leaving an established religion where people say, "Yep, God, I'm with you," as opposed, because at that time God was the God of his father Jacob. It wasn't like the God, if you know what I mean. And whereas for the Maccabees, it's sort of like if you want to believe in the gods that you believe in, that's fine. But for us, we're sticking with our God and everything that comes with it. And so, even if you look at the story of Jacob and when he marries Rachel, isn't there in the story like she is of a different group? I mean, presumably her father believed in a different God, or if her father believed in a God at all. And
He did.
He
had gods.
He had gods.
She took them.
And so is she assimilating to Jacob's God, or is she saying, well, Jacob's a really nice guy, I think I'm going to go off with Jacob, and where you go, I will follow. And it's sort of like, it's not like...
So it's clearly different. It's obviously clearly different after you're talking about an established tradition versus a clan's relationship with Yotei Vavei. Absolutely.
It seems that however people leave their childhood beginnings and off the world to discover themselves, there's always that kesher, that connection from way back. And you take in Joseph's case, he wanted to be married with his family. in Canaan in the end. And very often we see it in our own society. Young people are off doing their thing and they get married. They come back, they want their kids to get educated. But there's always that little kesha, that connection. And
that you don't really experience until you have your own children. You don't really find it.
yeah, well, because you don't know about, you know there's something there. The dynamics nowadays where young people don't participate, say, in church or synagogue life, but they know they're Catholic or they know they're Jewish, and that's a kesher in itself.
Okay.
My name is Lynn. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Richard. Going off what you were saying, I seem to recall that we weren't a people until we got the Ten Commandments, and that when we were in Egypt, we were known as the Hebrews. So we weren't really a people with these deep, deep traditions until after we received the Ten Commandments and accepted them. So that's what I was thinking.
I heard an interview on NPR a couple of weeks ago with Amos Oz, who a famous Israeli secular author, who with his daughter has just written a book called Jews and Words.
Jews and what?
Words, Jews and Words. And part of their thesis, they're addressing the issue of what is a Jew and how, you can't be a secular Christian. You cannot be a secular Muslim. You can be a secular Jew. And so their answer to what is a Jew is that we are all tied together by our words, by the words that we study. And as we say, that the Torah is an Eitz Chaim, it is the tree of life, and that it is the words that, in effect, are the blood that connect us all.
And if you don't study, and you're a secular Jew,
never read the Torah,
and you don't engage with those words,
we need to read the book.
Right?
But they're not necessarily just talking about Torah. They're talking about our history, our stories.
Well, in that case, very Reconstructionist.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Maybe
no, absolutely.
they're talking about.
The Reconstructionist answer is how you can be a secular Jew and not a secular any of those other things is because we are not primarily or only a religion. We are a civilization.
Right. So
that as a member of that civilization, you are a Jew, regardless of how you relate to the religious aspect of that people.
And their answer, in a sense, as I understood it from this interview, is that it is in the talking about and the studying of our stories / texts that has created us as a people, not genetics, and not necessarily the religion or the country we live in or anything. It's an interesting. I've got to get the book and read it.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
But I would argue that is only because since Catholics have the Vatican and Muslims have whatever their top religious authorities are that they.
There isn't in this.
Well, except that. Well, I don't. Well, then I don't.
It's
know.
like Judaism.
It's not.
There's a zillion schools.
Okay, but all right. Well, I don't. I personally can't speak to whether or not you can consider yourself Muslim if you don't believe in God, for example.
You cannot. Muslim, you have to accept the
all right,
5 pillars.
So there is something external that tells you what you ought to believe, whether you do or not is a different issue. In Judaism, it's like we have no choice to some extent but to infer for ourselves meaning from our words and our stories as to what is going to give meaning to our spiritual lives.
Because we are not, as we said about Creed, we are a civilization.
Right, we're not doctrinal.
We are not primarily a religion. We are a civilization.
I've heard Muslims refer to secular Muslims, the ones who don't want to live under Islamic law. They believe everything else, but they don't want Islamic law. So I think there are Muslims, I've seen it a lot, I think there are people who consider other Muslims.
What do
they
you
may
mean
consider
by
them
religion versus civilization? So if we're reading the Torah, and that's not religion, that's just reading the story, and where's the religion part? Is it in the one God?
So let me back up. Let me be clear. To become Jewish, one doesn't say, I believe X, therefore I am now a Jew.
Right. Okay.
And if I don't believe that, I am no longer a Jew, I am something else, right? One is either born into the Jewish people, in which case you are part of this tribe, and I'm going to use that word on purpose. You are born into a tribe. So when I think about the best parallel, I think about my time in northern Minnesota. So I understood things much better after I lived among the Ojibwe, as the surrounding culture because or reality. Because if you're Ojibwe, no one asks you, so what do you believe? And how many times do you go to a sweat? And have you smoked the peace pipe this week? Oh, then how can you be Ojibwe? You didn't go to the sweat. Then are you really Ojibwe? Right? So no one would think to ask that question of the Ojibwe. Why? Because they get it. That Ojibwe is an identity that is way bigger than what religious observances one does or doesn't do. It's just much bigger than that. It's about a worldview. It's about a culture. It's about food. It's about history. It's about how you see everything given that history.
So
it's about language.
Very much.
So that is way closer to what it means to be Jewish, is what I'm saying, is what Reconstructionism says, is you're born Ojibwe.
Right.
Or you're adopted by the Ojibwe tribe because you personally align yourself with the way they see things, with what they take as their religious, way of talking about the relationship with the divine. You like their people, you fit with their people, you hang with their people, you marry into their people, right? Or something happens that you become a part of their people. Even if culturally you have other origins and still other likes and tastes and participations, you can become so close with one of them or many of them that you are adopted by that tribe. You are given an Ojibwe name and you become part of the Ojibwe people. Not just their religion. That's what I mean. That you don't...
Religion is one small part.
Is a part of a much bigger thing to say, what does it mean that I'm Jewish?
I would not so use the word small in our history, but it is a part.
It is a part of what it means to say I'm Jewish, is that this is my way of... that Judaism is the religious expression of the Jewish people. It is not the only expression of... there's other expressions of the Jewish people.
I'm sure we all know people who, or I know people who are atheists and who don't practice any of what we would call Judaism, but
they're very Jewish.
Very, very Jewish, culturally and otherwise. And there's something about our people. Now, in America, the word tribal is a bad word because we are the country where you come here and you leave your tribe behind. That is what the ideology of America is. This is why Reconstructionism is so uniquely American. And we face very different issues as American Jews, perhaps, than Jews face in other countries.
But I'm going to challenge that only in that I think that's what America was.
Right.
I'm not sure anymore that's the... I think we are much more a tossed salad than a melting pot of, pureed soup.
Depends on whether
now.
you're in a red state or a blue state.
So I think that is a tension that is still, that is very present right now, is that there's many people who say what America is the place you leave your tribe behind. Exactly right.
That's what
and I think a lot of folks these days are saying absolutely not. America is about lots of different tribes living together with their own cultural identities.
Little Tokyo, Chinatown, Vietnam,
yes, in a place that is safe and that affirms everybody's right to, come and swear loyalty to, this country and this set of, ideals through the lens of their own identity. And right now, identity. It's very interesting the time we live in terms of even this word identity. That there are some folks who are saying you can't use the word identity singular. You have to say identities, that there is no central identity for any one of us. And it's just like this whole, it's like, it scares me because it busts apart my whole understanding that, okay, there's one integral, me, and there really is a lot of talk now about that it isn't one, right?
Years ago when Fiddler on the Roof came out, in my office, we had about 25 office people, 25 or 30, and from every phase, he had every color, religion, and so on, and they all related to Fiddler from their own culture.
That's right. Right? Because many cultures have similar stories.
Right.
So we're not going to get to the end of our parsha this morning.
It all worked out.
So we will make a Misha Berach for those who are ill.